You're listening to the podcast When Life Gives You Lemons, presented by me, Emma Levy. Having worked with elite athletes for most of my career, it's always intrigued me that a significant number of high-performing individuals have encountered some form of adversity earlier in their lifetime. My fascination into this grew when I had my own brush with adversity, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer in May 2020, in the midst of the global pandemic, at the age of only 36. During this period, I questioned whether it was my positive mindset, or maybe something deeper, which enabled me to bounce back and to train and compete for a triathlon just 1 month following completion of all active cancer treatment. The goal of this podcast is to explore this concept further by meeting a variety of high-performing individuals who have experienced adversity, but who have come back stronger. Today I'm welcoming Alice Olins to the podcast. Alice wears many hats. She has been described as an entrepreneur, coach, media expert, journalist, author, public speaker, and a mother of 3. After the publication of her first book, she founded the Step Up Club, which helps women to thrive in their careers. In this episode, we will be discussing the loss of Alice's firstborn son, who was stillborn at 40 weeks. It is a tragedy which is every parent's worst nightmare, and I will be asking Alice how that experience continues to influence her life and the person she is today. Alice, thank you for joining us today. First off, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you, Emma.
As a writer, I know you've written a few articles about your son Bear and what you went through. Are you happy to share that story with us?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and definitely reading and hearing your podcast and kind of the premise of it is definitely something that I have thought about personally myself, and it's definitely something that resonates with me, and it's really nice that you have kind of packaged it into something that other people can learn from and maybe use to be able to explore themselves. Because we all, I mean, we're going to talk about the loss of Bear, and that's a very extreme adversity, but we all go through adversities in our lives, and I'm such a believer in us being able to harness that, and I'm actually, a lot of my work is helping women particularly to leverage difficult times and actually open themselves up to difficult times, and kind of we learn and we grow when things are challenging. We don't kind of, it's very hard to develop in the status quo. So it's something that has kind of, in many forms, it informs a lot of what I do, and it's very present for me always.
Great. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger, hey?
For sure.
That is one of my favourite quotes.
Yeah.
So obviously it was a devastating loss. You were 40 weeks.
Yeah,
it was on your due date.
He was born on my due date, on his due date, yeah.
Wow. And did you know anything? Were you prepared?
No, had no idea. I mean, I kind of half joke about it now that at the time I was a journalist at the Times. I worked on Times 2. We worked across all sorts of, I particularly worked in kind of women and style, but I worked with teams who kind of medical staff, news, I was constant, I love the news. I'm a real kind of, I constantly kind of reading the news and learning. I didn't even know that you could lose your child just before their due date. And I feel, and I consider myself quite educated and widely read, like I said, and I just didn't know that could happen. And truthfully, that happened in 2010. There has been a lot in the media. There's an incredible baby loss community now. I'm a trustee for a really a charity called Teddy's Wish that's very close to my heart, and I have a kind of community in that space. I don't get massively involved now, to be honest. It's something maybe a bit more private, but at the time when we lost Bear, there was just nothing. I mean, people didn't really talk about it, and actually after Bear died, I remember what's her name, Amanda Holden, she lost a baby. Lily Allen lost a baby. It was quite early on, I think. Or maybe it was Lily Allen, I might have got that wrong, but it was like there were a couple of kind of well-known women who were suddenly talking about it, and actually there was nothing when Bear died or before. So I was just tripping around London as a 29-year-old, just thinking, well, I'm about to have my first baby, and I'd already finished work for maternity leave, and everything was just, thought everything was fine.
Did they know what happened? Did you ever get an answer or a reason?
In 60%, or I think more, 60 or 70% of cases, you have no reason, and that we sadly fell into that bracket. When we then got pregnant again with Pearl, who's our oldest daughter, we went to an amazing consultant who actually looked at all of our notes, and he actually did a lot more research and kind of exploring. And it's not a definitive answer, but there was a placental problem. So the placenta in some way essentially gave up, and that does happen. And some babies are born healthy and fine with a compromised placenta, but for some reason, I mean, he was 7 pounds 7 ounces. It was like a big chunky baby. There was nothing wrong with him, but something. Yeah.
Were you angry at the world, at the hospital?
Oh yeah, I was in shock. I was angry at the delivery of the news, because we went in, I hadn't felt him move for that day. I was at home, and it was the first day of my maternity leave where I kind of felt tired. Before that I'd been completely fine. I just felt tired. It wasn't like a big deal or anything. And then I was thinking I hadn't really felt the baby move that much. And then my husband came home from work, and we were meant to be going out for dinner. And I said, I haven't, I'm not sure. And I thought, I didn't even think anything was wrong. I just thought maybe like I was about to give birth. I was just so naive. And we were going to go out for dinner, and my husband Toby said, well, let's go to the hospital on the way and just get checked out. And I said, no, let's go out for dinner and then go to the hospital. And he was like, no, let's go to the hospital. And we've since discussed that car journey, and neither of us discussed it, but both of us thought, oh, we're on our way to have our baby. Like, this is what, obviously something's happening. And we've got, because there's terrible literature out there around babies' movements decline before birth. It's all just not true. Yeah. But again, we knew nothing. And we went to the birthing centre, and they couldn't find a heartbeat. And it's so funny, because I am, or was, maybe not as much now, such a worrier of people. So I don't really worry about things, and I worry less about everything, strangely, now. But I used to be one of those people that if, like, my parents weren't home at a certain time, I'd suddenly think they were, like, under a bus, or, like, I go to worst place scenario. I still kind of do go to worst place scenario. The strangest thing in that moment, they couldn't find a heartbeat down the birth centre, and they said, we're just going to take you upstairs and get like a ultrasound. I wasn't even worried.
Really?
I kind of thought, all right, well, the machine's probably, it was just, I don't know if I was already in shock, or I don't know what was happening.
Or avoidant of it, maybe. Maybe you didn't want to think about the realisation of it.
I genuinely didn't, still didn't, it was just, anyway. Then they obviously delivered the news, that they basically said, that's the baby's heart and it's not beating. And they didn't, and again, like, I couldn't compute what they were actually saying. At that point, I couldn't compute, because it was so kind of removed from, Anyway, then we were sent home, and then you kind of give them medication, and then you go back. And the first thing I said was, I want a cesarean. And they're like, we don't encourage that. We really encourage you to deliver your babies naturally, or to deliver stillborn babies naturally. So I did deliver him naturally, which I am really pleased I did.
Yeah.
Was I angry? Yeah, I turned into a horrible, beastly woman. I was angry with everyone. I hated everyone. I didn't hate everyone, because some people were amazing, but ostensibly I hated anyone who was pregnant, anyone who had a baby, and everyone in my life was suddenly pregnant and having babies, and it was everywhere.
So difficult.
And I was angry, but that wasn't my kind of dominant emotion. My dominant emotion was just total despair and destruction, and I was just empty. I was completely broken.
It's unfathomable. And I read that 1 in 250 births ends in stillborn.
Yeah. And those stats aren't getting any better.
Well, I was going to ask, is research being done into that? Are they trying to improve those stats?
Yes, and Teddy's Wish and Tommy's are two charities that are working hard to try and fund. There's a lot of research going on in Manchester. We are so far behind in the UK, even other European countries. I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't necessarily think, you have so few appointments and so few scans. You have 2 scans. By 20 weeks, you're done. How anything can get picked up. So the stats aren't really getting better, but they are doing research.
So is it money? Is it lack of resources?
It probably is, yeah.
Yeah, and that's hard.
Yeah.
Oh, it is hard. How do you think that trauma changed you as a woman?
I think it made me grow up massively. it's kind of hard to encapsulate into one answer, because I think it's phased in a strange way. So I think, to start with, it changed me because I became someone who just didn't do anything I used to do. Left my job, didn't go out. I would only see a few people. And then obviously, I actually got another opportunity to work and do a maternity leave, ironically, of someone I knew at a magazine I knew, and I did it. I really didn't want to do it, but it was really good to do, and I was really pleased I did that. And I actually fell pregnant right at the beginning of that with Pearl. And then I think it made me like, I was so nervous. I don't think I slept for 9 months when I was pregnant with her. But when she was born, I was genuinely the happiest person in the whole world. Yeah. Someone had sent me a quote, I think it was Chloe, my friend Chloe actually, who had sent me this quote about your heart, and when you have a loss, that your heart kind of, I'm not going to be able to kind of do it justice, but there's something to do with the space in your heart, there was a hole in your heart, and then it's more capacity to hold love afterwards. And it was so true. I mean, I was the most, I mean, I'm probably not the most doting mother now because I've got 3 crazy children, but I am. Obviously, I love my children. But for Pearl, it was just this pure love, adoration. And it was just amazing. I genuinely was just in this bubble of joy constantly. And I remember going to this parenting club thing, and you had to rate yourself. It was so weird. As a parent, I gave myself 10 out of 10 on every front. And then I gave in, and I thought, I'm not even going to explain that. And they probably think I'm completely mad. But I did feel like that. Like I was just an amazing mum because I was so engaged. I was so happy and pleased. Yeah. So short term, it just made me really engaged in being a mother. Longer term, it's allowed me to be much more open. I've always been a really open person. I've got lots of amazing friends. I'm very close to my family. I'm a real talker and communicator. That's my thing. And I think it's brought greater depth to that. It's allowed me to step into places when other people are having a very hard time, and I don't have to say, I know how you're feeling, because I don't necessarily know how someone else is feeling, because every situation is different. But I think I have an empathy. I don't have a fear around other people going through trauma. I mean, it's not something that I want to be involved in. Obviously, I don't want people who I love to be suffering, but I'm not scared of that. And so I think I've maybe been able to be a good support for other people. And then through my work is about understanding women and helping them to see themselves and helping them to develop in all sorts of amazing ways. And I think that losing Bear still informs my work, because again, I'm able to, I think as a journalist, my skills were kind of disseminating information and being able to reproduce it. And essentially when you're supporting people, you're taking that information from them, and then you're almost playing it back to them in a different way. So those skills, I think, maybe not from losing Bear, but the depth of it, my ability to connect to people, help women who are struggling feel safe, is definitely, I think, helps me in the work that I do. Yeah,
I can definitely empathise with that lack of fear of other people's trauma. Yeah. Having been through trauma, it's really interesting. My shift on that as well. When you've been through a trauma, you can really empathise much more with other people going through that. And I'd never really thought about the fact that maybe that's also made me more of a supportive friend. So thank you. That's
I think that person who's struggling also knows that you have been through something. And again, it doesn't need to be something that's discussed or spoken, but perhaps your point of view or you being in their space is easier for them too, because there's some type of understanding there that if you haven't, and it's harder to take advice from someone when maybe they haven't experienced that kind of depth of difficulty or despair, or, Yeah,
definitely. Do you talk to your 3 children about Bear?
Yeah, for sure. Our littlest is 3. He's a boy. And so we have quite a lot of photos of Bear around, and the girls totally, they're 11 and 9, and they talk about him, and sometimes in, you know, it's funny, he hasn't been mentioned. We don't talk about him maybe as much at the moment, only because we've got a crazy 3-year-old toddler who seems to like suck the life out of all of us.
I know how that feels.
Yeah, in a wonderful way. It was interesting, actually, when we fell pregnant with Monty, our son. So we had to, I was really worried about having another boy after losing Bear. And my grandmother, who I was very close to, who I think maybe I'm quite similar to, had 4 boys. So I was always felt I was going to be a mother of boys. Yeah. Maybe wanted to be a mother of girls to some degree, but and had Bear, and then thought I'm probably just going to have lots and lots of boys now, and it's going to be really hard. And then when we found out that Pearlie was a girl, you know, I was relieved, I have to say, because it was different.
Yeah,
and it felt too close. You know, because actually after Bear died, I used to walk around Gap Kids and just look at all the boys' clothes and wasn't interested in the girls' clothes, you know. So I knew that obviously if it was another boy, it would all be fine. But I think for ease and simplicity, it just felt easier to have a girl. Yeah. And then we had another girl. And then I got pregnant again. And funny enough, Monty's due date was actually on Bear's due date.
Oh, my goodness.
And he was a boy, and I kind of just knew that was all going to happen. It was really strange. But anyway, he was born 3 weeks early, as they all were, because I'm kind of high risk pregnancy, etc. So he wasn't born on Bear's anniversary in the end. But we always do something on his birthday. We take the girls out. Nice. He's still part of our family for sure. And it's funny because in situations like this. And this is no, you know, it's totally fine. You know, you introduce me to someone who's having 3 children. I do have 4 children, but really? I never say I have 4 children. Yeah. So I don't expect other people to say it. Yeah, you know, I do sometimes. There are situations where it was National Sons Day this week and everyone was posting about their sons. And I kind of thought, I'm not even going to go there because I don't always have to go there. You know, I don't have to. But, you know, there were times where at the beginning it was, I just, you know, when we didn't have Pearlie and we had nothing, and we were this kind of couple that were just, I don't know, we were parents without having a baby, and all I wanted to do was tell people about him constantly because I felt like he's a part of us. Why should we not be viewed in that way? And that does subside. Yeah. And sometimes I don't feel guilt around it, but sometimes I feel that I have to remember to talk about him, and I like other people talking about him as well. Yeah,
nice. Why do you think that when people ask you how many children you have, you don't say 4, even though you feel like you are a parent of 4?
To save them, probably to a certain degree, to save myself in those moments where sometimes I have, you know, it's interesting. Sometimes I'll meet I don't know, I've met a mum at nursery recently who I didn't know, and I end up telling her quite quickly. And other people will know me for a long time and won't know. So I suppose it's situation, it's just where my head is at. And it's not that I feel that I'm going to necessarily break down about something, but it depends how much is going on, I suppose, and how maybe how I feel connected to them, or whether I feel like it's, I don't know. It's
interesting because baby loss.
Do you tell everyone about your cancer?
No.
Yeah.
No, and I think as well it's to save them.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because you don't want to put them in that, what you know they're going to be awkward. What do I say?
Exactly.
How do I react?
Exactly.
So I think,
and the loss of a child is so, and to lose to have a stillborn baby is so unfathomable for so many people that it's just too much for people to even get their head around. And then you're standing on the street and suddenly, you know, I wouldn't expect them to be able to understand or say anything right. So it is probably to save them, and then often probably just to save me too, because I'm, you know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But I do still find that baby loss is, I don't know if it's the right word, but quite a taboo subject. You know, and it's not so comparable, but I had a miscarriage after 12 weeks in between our kids. And at the time, it was obviously a very difficult scenario, but we didn't tell anyone. You know, we didn't tell our bestest friends. I think we told some family members. And having, you know, that's now a number of years away, and having spoken to friends about it in recent years, I know so many people that went through the same thing, and they also didn't tell anyone. So why do we not talk about it?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's a sense that everything should be easy and perfect, maybe, when we're producing children. And it is private, I suppose, because I think as a woman, it's also so connected to your body. So I had a real, you know, and the amazing, I mean, we heard some statistics. We went to counselling after we lost Bear, and it was really good. But I think she told us, or someone told us, that, you know, most couples actually end up splitting up after the loss of a child because it's so difficult, and they're on such different planes. And Toby and I were really on the same page, thank God. Yeah. But there is such an extra element for the mother, because physically your body still thinks your body has just had a baby, and you know, your body changes and just everything. And so I think maybe as a woman, it's self-preservation to not talk about those things. But you're right. I mean, we actually had a miscarriage between Bear and Pearly, which was horrific, because it was just like, how many bad things can happen?
Yeah, I can imagine.
And when you just asked me something, and as I was going through the timeline, and I thought I won't bother mentioning that because that's kind of another thing to add. But now that you said it, you know, but so maybe to some degree, again, it's saving. And I just think the 12-week thing is a misnomer for me. It's just pointless. You know, you're either pregnant or you're not. And you're right. Like if you tell people at 6 weeks and you lose it, it normalises for other people, and it is so normal. So yeah, I think we told everyone really early when we got pregnant, and we did harmony tests really early, and we were like, having a girl and we're only 6 weeks pregnant, you know, that type of
tell everyone.
Joy. Yeah, exactly.
In this podcast, I do like to talk to our guests about their grit and their resilience and how you've been able to overcome your adversity. And I actually saw an article that you wrote on resilience.
Love that subject.
Yeah. I'm going to read a sentence that I enjoyed, where you said, "It isn't the art of developing resilience that the women I work with find tricky. It's often the basic concept of identifying as a resilient person that stops them moving forward." And I found that really interesting. And I wondered if you identify as being a resilient person.
I do identify as being a resilient person. I think I've always identified as being a resilient person. I'm a get up and go doer. It's just who I am. I'm more resilient, but I'm also older. So, you know, it isn't only Bear that has influenced my life. I've had career changes, I've had friend changes, I've had house changes, you know, and so I'm someone who's always pushing for more, and I'm not scared to step out of my comfort zone, to kind of rock the boat a bit. And so I think those two very much go hand in hand. I think I will float. I won't always, you know, I might sink in the short term and something might not go right, but I think ultimately I can make it go right. And I think that's just part of who I am. And I've developed resilience, and obviously I understand the concept of resilience and its kind of ingredients. And I have all of those in abundance, you know, having a supportive network. I have an incredibly supportive network, being able to be self-aware as a person. I know I'm self-aware, being truthful and honest. I'm someone who can't help but be honest. That's really important. You need to be able to communicate to yourself and to others how you're feeling. And actually part of resilience is being able to, and I always encourage women to do this, it isn't about batting away what's happened if something's gone awry. Actually, part of being resilient is being able to feel those emotions for a portion of time. So if something fails that you wanted to do, sit with that. Don't feel you immediately have to move on and be happy and ready to start again. But I think inherently within resilience there's an ability to go, I'm going to sit in this, and then I'm going to make a choice to move forward or learn and be able to kind of look back. And I don't wallow, I don't wallow in things. I definitely feel stuff. But yeah, I think I am somebody who is resilient. Yeah.
So where do you sit on the nature nurture side of things?
I mean, I'm 100% my dad. Everyone says they're their mum. I'm so different from my mum. It's quite astonishing. Nature nurture.
Like, do you think you're born?
Both,
do you think everyone is born with a degree of resilience? And then
I think babies are incredibly resilient. They don't know they are, but I mean, look at those tiny 1 pound babies that get born, or not 1 pound, 1 kilo babies that get born. I mean, babies, I think humans are resilient. I think we erode our own resilience through our overthinking, through experience, through other people's view of us, of how we're brought up. You know, I think it's almost the other way around. I think we are, as a race, as a species, we are resilient because we keep going despite it all.
Well, I think it's so interesting. You look at babies, you know, how they keep trying to do something. They keep trying to stand up, they fall over. They just try again, they fall over. They try again, they fall over. And then I think at some point, like you're saying, some people lose that resilience. And I'm interested as to what causes that loss of resilience. And then I really believe that people are able to grow their resilience based on their experiences. I'm
think so
a big believer of that. But I don't want to think that everyone has to go through a traumatic experience just to make them resilient. So what tips would you give someone who wanted to work on their resilience?
So much of our resilience rides in what's going on inside our head. The voice in our head, how loud we allow our inner critic to get, that natural voice that is there within all of us, and accepting that it's there. Again, it's what makes us human. I feel for women predominantly, and this is a generalization, that we succumb to the voice too often, and that it's interesting because when we're talking about an openness about miscarriage, I think there's not enough openness around us all having a negative voice inside our heads and normalizing that, because I think if we did, we would be able to get a handle on her more easily. And I think a lot of women allow thoughts and beliefs to become fact, and there's a real difference between the thoughts we have and the truth that exists, and we conflate those often, and I think that is so erosive when it comes to resilience. We believe we can't do something, we feel that we're not good enough, you know, sometimes we're told we're not good enough, or you know, especially as women, we're working up against so many other obstacles, and that doesn't help. So
but it's not so easy to put that into practice, is it?
What, managing your inner voice?
Yeah.
I think it actually is easier than, I think it is. I think it takes consistency, and I think it takes discipline, but I don't think the art of it is hard. I think the tricky bit is being consistent with it. So it is recognizing repeated negative thoughts that you have and saying that's a classic Alice thought. That's okay. I'm going to have that thought, and I'm either going to recognize it and let it go, or I'm going to try and to replace it with something evidence-based that is truthful. So if it's that I don't think I'm very good at running, let's say, and every time I feel that I'm in a race, I'm really bad at this, and then you kind of look back and go, actually there were times, I'm really good at skiing, or I'm actually really good at sport. Well, I can transfer those skills, or if I'm good there, then I'm probably not that bad there. And it's being able to be objective about what's going on in your mind. You can't stop it, but you can manage it better. And I don't think it's hard, but I think it takes, like I said, consistency and discipline and an openness to challenge yourself. And I think a lot of women at the first instant just think, I just don't have the energy, or I just don't have the time, or I just don't, I'm too busy, and actually there's such value in just being able to carve out some time to think and reflect and get more of a handle on, be a bit more strategic about yourself, I think is what I'm saying, and not just allow things to happen. Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about the inner critic, because one of my previous guests, the adventurer Vicky Anstey, she was talking about the inner critic, and one of the methods she teaches is to, I don't know if you've heard of this, she built a clay model of her inner critic.
Okay.
Have you heard of this before?
Well, I've heard of renaming her as someone different, if that's kind of where you're getting to.
I think that's basically what she was saying. So she built this clay model of this inner critic, and it was ugly and horrible. Yeah. And then that inner critic would sit with her, and she could look at it and say, no, that's
it's that separation. Right. That's kind of what I'm talking about, and saying it's not me, it's my thoughts, and my thoughts aren't who I am. They're part of how I process the world and how I experience the world, but they're not necessarily fact. And I think we take them often as fact because, and they, there's a ridiculous statistic about the number of negative thoughts we have a day, tens and tens and tens of thousands of them. But the interesting kind of sub-stat within that is that 80% of those we had the same thought the day before, and that we had the same thought the day before that. And it's just those not just, but it's that repetition of negative thoughts that's hard to break. But if we can recognise them, that's the first step in being able to get a handle on what's going on inside our head and being separate from them. Yeah.
Working in sport, I've always come across the chimp theory.
Oh, go on, what's that?
Have you not heard about that? The chimp sitting on your shoulder. Yeah, so very similar to the inner critic. But my struggle with that I've always, and I read there's a book about it, I can't remember the author now, I probably should, it's called The Chimp Paradox.
Yeah.
Brilliant book because it really explains it very clearly, this theory. But I've always struggled with, and what you say, it's all so rational. But when that chimp is telling you something in your ear, you can't rationalise with it. Or how do you rationalise with it? You know, that's my question. Like, yeah, I can try and do that and say, oh, you know, you're being silly, inner critic or chimp. But it's not always so easy.
No, it's not. It's not easy in the moment. And again, it's almost about recognising patterns. So I often get my clients to draw like a flow diagram of their response to a difficult situation so that they can go, I'm in that phase, and we might even colour code it. So we might start it being red, and you have a very red response, and your inner critic's going wild, and you're feeling physically physiologically it's it's coming out and like sweating hands and whatever you're feeling hot going. And then what's the next phase? You calm down a bit, maybe it's still quite orange, and you've got another narrative that plays up at this point that's like, I'm just not strong enough to go back to my manager and kind of, I don't know, challenge what he said or she said. And then as we move through, you always ultimately get back to green because you do come out of that flow diagram. In fact, the flow diagram came from some parenting advice I once had from an amazing woman called Livy, who we were talking about. One of my children was a tantrumer. And she was saying, once a toddler starts tantruming, they've got to peak out. They will get to their peak. So number one, just knowing they're going on this peak and kind of come down again is actually empowering as a parent. And also realising that the more questions you ask them while they're having their tantrum, like, what do you want for dinner? Da, 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 you're just making that peak get higher and higher and higher. And so that really sat with me because it was like, we are always going to have an arc of response to something difficult. So it's not stopping it at its instant. So it's saying, like, Emma, I'm in my red phase. I'm having that. Now is not the time for me to make a rational decision. I'm having, everything is loud in my head. So I'm going to just allow that to be, and I'm going to come back to it in an hour or a day or whatever my kind of pattern is. And so it's getting a handle in a more broad sense and recognising, I know I'm having this very red response, but I will go to orange and back to green again. And so almost being able to foresee what's coming is empowering to be able to manage those difficult situations.
Yeah, thank you. That's very good advice. Which takes me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is the fact that you were a journalist for 10 years and then you changed profession. And we haven't really talked about that. Yep. Can you tell us what happened? Because I can imagine after being a journalist, and a successful journalist, I believe, for a long time, it must take a lot of bravery to have pivoted and to gone down a different route.
Well, it took no bravery because I said I was going to leave the minute I lost Bear. So it was totally connected to that.
Right. Okay, so I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, so I was in the hospital room, and I think the first thing I said was, I'm never going back to work.
Ever?
No.
All types of work or journalism?
Because I had been there so outwardly pregnant. Yeah. And I think it was that was the... So it wasn't journalism. I love journalism. It's the best training I could ever recommend for anyone. I loved every moment of my career, and I still write, and it's still very much part of who I am. So it wasn't that I rejected the profession, I just couldn't go back to that job. Despite it being my ultimate job, I couldn't go back there.
Your dream job on
my
paper.
Dream job, yeah, for sure. So I decided not to do anything for a little while, and then did I do the freelance first? No, I think then I got this maternity cover.
And was that a journalist job? So you went back to journalism initially?
Yeah, I went back as a fashion features director at Marie Claire, and it was brilliant actually. And I was given a promotion on maternity leave, and I launched a new magazine for them, and it was great. And it was great for me because it gave me something to focus on. They really appreciated me. I realised I still had everything that I had before, and it was fun, and it was fast. It was only 10, 11 months, and it was brilliant. So I'm really thankful for that opportunity. And that really, my husband literally pushed me out the door. I mean, pretty much, not actually on the first day, but I said, I don't think I can do this. And he said, yes, you can, and you have to do it. And I really, really want you to do it. And I don't often listen to him, but I did listen to him in that instance, maybe because I thought he was speaking the truth. And it was scary. I mean, it was massively scary, because I actually went in with my friend who was pregnant at the time. So on the first day I went in with her, and she was like 8 months pregnant. It was just, it was complex. But I did it, and it was hard, and it was brilliant. So that's, that's also part of my recovery, I suppose, if you're going to... but then I did a bit of freelance work, and it didn't work for me. So my dad had always said to me in a slightly gendered way, journalism would be great for you, because when you've got kids, you can freelance and you can still work, and you'll have your children at home. That doesn't work, because for me, it really didn't work, because what I love about journalism is being with people, listening to stories, picking up stories and finding my angle and then getting it down. And when you're at home with a toddler, there ain't no stories going on that anyone's going to be interested in you writing about particularly. So I did do a bit of parenting, and I found it parenting journalism, and I just found it so dull. So I realised this was not going to be working for me. But equally, because I was a 10 out of 10 mum, I also wasn't going to go back to a full-time job. I wasn't ready to kind of do that. So an opportunity came along to potentially write a book, and it felt like the perfect opportunity, because I could do it on my terms. We had some help. It meant I was out of the house working somewhere separate, but I wasn't out for hours and hours and hours on end. So it was a really good opportunity. So that bit didn't feel scary. It almost felt like an extension of what I'd been doing, but in a way that felt interesting and new and empowering.
But the subject of the book was
women's career development. So that wasn't at the time, that wasn't my area of expertise. But I did it with a friend, and I was the writer communicator, and she was the kind of researcher, as it were. Right. So it was
was that her field?
Yeah, it was her field. Okay. So it was a good blend of skills. And then everything after that happened organically. And it was the scary bit was when my then business partner, who I wrote the book with, decided that she didn't want to be part of the business anymore, and it came out of the blue, and I had to make a decision about whether to take it on myself. And I think the assumption was from her side that I wouldn't want to, and we would just wrap it up. But I just felt like it was the beginning. I mean, I had loads of stuff I wanted to do. I really had felt like I'd found my niche, and hadn't even really got in my niche yet. It's just like I had a sense that the niche was coming, and I absolutely wasn't going to stop. So it was.
How many years down the line was that?
That was it was 2 years after the book, so probably about 2.5 years in.
Okay.
But it felt very, it was taking up a lot of my time at that point, and we were very intertwined in terms of our work and our lives and everything. So I suppose the scary bit was taking it on. I think it was the day we kind of signed, sealed and delivered, was the day I found out I was pregnant with Monty.
Oh, wow.
So that was great timing. And just deciding I was going to carry on, and I was going to change it up and do it in the way that I wanted to do it. And it felt incredibly freeing in a way. And nothing, I loved the partnership I'd been in, and it was brilliant. And I'm really thankful that it kind of brought me to where I am. So, but I also love working on my own. I still work with people. I can't work solely on my own. Just that's not who I am. But it felt really freeing to suddenly have something of my own and be able to plan, and still am trying to work out how to make it work, but like the direction to take it and things like that has been, it's been exciting.
Do you love what you do?
Yes, I love what I do. I don't love running the business. I would love someone to come in and say, I will run the business bit for you and you do all the other stuff. But I'm still learning and I enjoy it. And I've got a brilliant business coach who helps me with the business side of things. So I find it interesting to still be learning, but I'm not a natural kind of numbers person. So that's the bit I struggle with. But, it's all part and parcel.
And are you goal driven? Have you got a goal of where you want to go?
Yes, I am goal driven. We're going to be the #1 provider of women's professional development in the UK, both in corporates and kind of direct to customer. We're not there yet, but we will get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am goal-driven. It's funny, when you were saying to me it was your dream job at the Times, which it really was, I found a 5-year plan that I wrote when I was probably about 17. And I think it was when I was at uni. Anyway, my 5-year plan was to end up working at the Times, and I did it within the 5 years. And I just found it really interesting. I'm not saying that in a showy-offy way, because I worked for free for long enough and paid my dues. It was more that I'd written a 5-year plan when I was like 17 or 18. So obviously I have this within me, and I kind of could see the value in it. It was just something I wrote and then probably felt really embarrassed about and shoved in the back of a notebook. But I think there's such power in being able to identify your goals and talk about them and talk about where you want to go. I'm a big advocate of women being able to articulate where they're going and not just what they've done.
Absolutely. But I'm also a big advocate of women having, not only women actually, individuals having the confidence to pivot in their careers. So just because you've done something for, I've been a physio for 15 years, and the same as you, I reached my goal. I always wanted to work with elite athletes. And, I got that dream job working with elite athletes, which I still do and I still love. But that wasn't a reason for me not to start kind of diverting out a little bit for this podcast. And this isn't a job yet for me. It's still a passion project. However, I think having that confidence to do something different is so important.
Yeah, and all the stuff you're learning is going back into your other work as well, into other parts of your life. So it's funny, on the way here I was listening to some of your episodes, and I don't have regret in my life. I'm not that type of person. But if I did have regret, because I am only human, so obviously there's a bit in there, it's that I didn't pursue sport.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I love sport. I'm obsessed with sport. I was quite a good athlete. I used to run for the county, and I should have done it more.
Never too late. You could be a masters athlete.
I'm not sure I could, Emma. But I am obsessed with sport as a mirror for life, and I'm such an advocate of my children, especially my girls, doing sport. We do a lot of sport. I think it's so important to learn about yourself, to learn about team building, to learn. One of my oldest daughter's a very solitary sportswoman. So she's a cross-country runner and she's a climber. She does amazing. She's an amazing rock climber.
Wow.
And our middle daughter is a total team sport girl. She's an amazing footballer and kind of other team sports. And we've always said, for girls in London, sport has to be key. Like, it's such... My husband's quite sporty too. We love watching sport. We make them watch so much sport, they just get so bored. But they know all the tennis players, and they know all, the Olympics. We had 2 weeks of watching the Olympics back to back. And, my oldest daughter's also an amazing skateboarder, and she's obsessed with, Sky Brown. And it's amazing for them. It's role models, and just the perseverance, the resilience, everything I talk about in my work is shown in sport, and it's enjoyable, and I just love it. So I kind of, one day something.
a masters athlete.
Maybe. I don't know what that is. I'm going to ask you afterwards.
There's always the London Marathon around the corner.
I don't know. No, I love running, but my husband's run it. I don't think I could.
Not anyone.
I'm not resilient enough, Emma.
Anyone can do it, Alice. That's what I always say when people say, I could never do that.
I think I could do it. I just don't know that I want to do it.
Yes, that's the difference.
The point, yeah.
I like to ask on this podcast as well, which books you have found that have been helpful in you overcoming your adversity. Because I think as well as a writer, I'm imagining you read a lot.
I do read a lot.
And my listeners do really enjoy these book recommendations. So is there anything specific you could think about?
Oh God, you've put me on the spot.
Yeah,
now.
Sorry, I should have prepared you on that one.
I mean, I've got 2 books that are a bit more kind of personal development books, which haven't really helped me through adversity, but I know they help a lot of people and I love them. Yeah. Actually 3. So one's called Chatter by Ethan Kross, and it's exactly what I was talking about our internal chatter and helping us to recognise, manage and harness it to help us rather than to hinder us. So that's a great book. Yeah. Another one which you must know is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Yes.
I find that a very simple book.
It's great.
The concept.
Yeah, the concept's good. Yeah. But the point about consistency he hammers home, and habits, there's an amazing graph in that book, and it plots over time how we build a new habit, and how it takes on average about 12 weeks. But the point is, what's the interesting bit is you see no return on your investment for about 9.5 weeks. Yeah. And it's called this, and he does this kind of arc called the Valley of Disappointment, or the Arc of Disappointment or something. And I thought that was really empowering, because you spend so long committing and you see no return. And that's where we tend to give up on habits. Yeah. And then you suddenly get this exponential kind of return on your consistency. And that, I think that's really important, because habits are hard and it's hard to stick to things, and you have this beginning kind of energy and excitement about, it can be anything. It can be starting something small or big or whatever it is, but we have to push through the bits where it feels like it's going nowhere to see the results. And also, is it James Clear's book that starts all about the British cycling team?
Yes.
I love that as well.
Marginal Gains.
Marginal Gains is so good. So I love that book. And then there's a book by Tara Mohr called Playing Big.
Okay.
Or is it Playing Bigger? I think it's Playing Big. And she talks about lots of things around, it's specifically for women in the workplace. But she talks about something that really stuck with me is she separates out fear into two camps. And she actually takes it back to an Old Testament passage around fear, and names these two fears that are named in the Old Testament, which I can't recall the two names of them. But she says that, or it says, and she then talks around, we feel fear. Sometimes the fear is very constricting, so it stops us doing what we want to do. And then another part or subset of fear is that exhilaration fear, where you feel you're almost standing on the edge of something and you're being heightened by it. And it's just this amazing passage around, again, kind of getting a handle on fear. It isn't just this one nebulous feeling. It can have lots of kind of elements within it. And the way that she broke it down, and that you can kind of teach yourself to move from the constricted fear to something that feels very open, to allow you to start a podcast or change careers, and actually kind of recognise that as something that can drive you forward rather than hold you back. So I love that passage in there. It's really good.
That's really interesting. I will check that one out. Yeah. Thank you. Final question. Yeah. I like to ask all our guests, if you could go back in time to when things were at their lowest, at their worst, what do you wish you could have told yourself?
Well, first and foremost, you will have 3 more children, because that was the thing that you feel like you're not going to have. You're never going to have children. Everyone else is going to. That you will laugh and smile again, and things will be happy, and you won't feel like a kind of outsider in your old life, but you'll feel very much part of your life again. Yeah, probably just that, because that's the main, all the other stuff, work and things, they're not so important. Yeah. The important bit is building our family, which we have done. There will be no more children. And them all being amazing, and us being happy and being able to have what we wanted to build on that front.
Yeah, thank you. Alice, if people want to know more about you, where can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram at the Step Up Club. They can find me on LinkedIn under Alice Olins. Thank you for pronouncing my name right. Most people don't. And they can find me, they can sign up to our newsletter, which I'm sure you'll put in the show notes or something.
Yes, I absolutely will. Alice, thank you. Thank you for coming on and talking about what I can only imagine is a very difficult subject to talk about. And to find courage and direction out of that experience is truly remarkable. So
thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Emma.
If you enjoyed that episode, please do rate, review and subscribe, because it really does make a difference for the podcast. We're so excited that the first series of When Life Gives You Lemons is sponsored by Co's Linen. Co's supply some of the UK's finest hotels with luxury linens, including bedding, towels and bathrobes. So if you want to feel like you're on holiday or a spa break every day, then I can highly recommend their products. I really love my personalised bathrobe. You know that feeling when you've had a long day at work or a really hard workout? That's when all I want is to have a hot bath, dry myself in my fluffy Co's towel and then relax on the sofa. And that is when you'll find me in my Co's bathrobe.
Honestly, the most cosy item I've ever owned. All products can be personalised with custom monograms designed by leading interior designer Sophie Patterson. You can find them exclusively online at www.coslinen.com. Listeners to When Life Gives You Lemons can save 10% with the discount code POD10. You can find a link in the show notes.